Hello and welcome to Local Impact You Can Make a Difference. I'm Debbie Peterson, your host, and tonight we have a guest who's maybe a little different than some of the ones we've had before because he has so many different bows in his quiver. There were so many things that I felt could connect to some of our listeners that I really wanted to have David Deputy join us. And he has quite an interesting background. He was a trooper, an investigator, loads of investigation. And when he retired after his 25 years with the Delaware State Police, he went on to a 40-year career in the reserve component of the Air Force with the Delaware Air National Guard, and he ultimately retired as a brigadier general. He continues to be involved in a public service because he's a legislative aide. What's really fascinating and what I cannot quit thinking about is that he has written a book based on the investigation he did and uncovered some incredible history about George Washington that changes the story of what happened during the Revolutionary War, or at least during part of the Revolutionary War. And he came by that honestly, at least we'll say genetically, because he had an uncle, Richard Moots, who had played a central role in locating Nazi gold reserves that had been lost at the end of World War II. So he has some writings about that. But his newest book is The Spring Grove Mill House. And I'm going to have him talk with us about that. And it's so incredible right now because July 2nd, when we're doing this interview, and 4th of July, of course, is 2 days away, but we're also in year 250 of our nation. I'm just thrilled to introduce you, David. Thank you for coming. This is a really busy week, I know, for all of us. Been talking about your house and your book. So let's start in on your book. Tell us what you discovered that changed our understanding of the history of one of George Washington's battles.
Back in 1777, the British set out to seize Philadelphia, which was our capital at the time. The thought was back then in European war standards, if you seized the capital, you won the war. They set out to seize Philadelphia. General Howe used his brother was in charge of the Navy, the British Navy. So he put all his 16,000 British and Hessian troops in New York, put them on his brother's ships, and they sailed all the way down to near Delaware. They were going to go up the Delaware River to seize Philadelphia, but they realized Washington was preparing for that event. So instead, General Howe avoided the conflict by going up to the Chesapeake Bay and landing his 260 ships in Elkton at the head of the Chesapeake Bay. From there, it's 55 miles to Philadelphia, but you have to go through Delaware. And Washington was preparing for this. He brought his troops down from New Jersey into Wilmington for several weeks. They were planning for the battle that would end the war in Delaware. Originally, he was going to try to make this happen in Couch's Bridge, which is right across the Maryland line in Delaware. But he changed his mind and decided to set up a defensive position closer to Wilmington, close to my house, called Stanton Marshallton area near Newport, Delaware. Washington had 11,000 troops versus the 16,000 British, but setting up a good defensive position would kind of be an equalizer. General Howe cleverly fooled Washington into thinking that he was coming upon this defensive position by sending some of his force that direction. But really, he took the majority of his 16,000 and went north around Washington. So he wanted Washington to stay in place. That's why he sent some troops towards it. And it did work for the whole day. Washington stayed in place, and then he realized at the end of the day that he got tricked. So he sent General Whedon to find where the British were. Back in those days, it's all on foot. So if they get ahead of you, you're in a bad position. They could seize Philadelphia without a fight. And that would be extremely embarrassing to our country in Washington. And trying to get the French to help us, they would be hesitant to think if we could be that tricked that easily that they wouldn't help. Washington sent General Whedon to find the British. When they got to my property, has a stream running through it. And on the east side, that's where General Whedon from the Continentals approached from. And he could see on the west side of the creek where my house sits, he could see about a couple hundred British soldiers. So they exchanged fire throughout the evening. They were ordered to stay in place, exchange fire across the hill, which was a little too far for the weaponry to be accurate. Some of the Washington's troops were upset about that, but Washington had a clever plan. He was just creating a distraction. And he snuck around on the south side to look behind where these couple hundred British forces were to verify that the 16,000 British soldiers were behind this event. So once he did that, the British still thought that Washington didn't know where they were, but he found them himself. That evening, he had a meeting in a house in that area, and troops that night, 2 o'clock in the morning, to march from their position, the 11,000, directly to Chad's Ford near the Brandywine River, and that's where the Battle of Brandywine took place. So Washington was able to get there about a day before the British, set up a defensive position there. And the British found Washington there on their way to Philadelphia. They had the largest battle of the Revolutionary War at that location. Washington lost that battle, but he didn't lose his army. They were able to retreat successfully and stay as an army. If he had lost his army, the war would have been over, basically. That gave the French confidence to rely on Washington, and it changed the outcome of the war because the French, right after that, decided that they were going to fully support the United States. That led to eventually to victory. So if Washington hadn't have found the British in time, they would have seized Philadelphia without a fight. French wouldn't have joined in as fast. The war could have drug on. We could have lost the war sometime or another. We could have lost the war at the Battle of Brandywine or lost the whole army if Washington hadn't gotten there ahead of time to set up a defensive position. Very minor event as far as combat on my property, but very significant to the overall war. So that was pretty amazing.
Yeah. You purchased this home not that long ago and you remodeled it. You were obviously fascinated by the local history. So, what is it that you discovered that it looks as though, and I think a lot of historians are beginning to agree with you, it looks as though maybe things didn't happen quite as we thought they had?
That scenario I just described with Washington is basically unknown. My book provides all the source documents, diaries from soldiers, and just all kinds of records to verify the story I just told. But it's all new information. People don't know about it yet until my book becomes hopefully more popular and they find out about it. But how we discovered it was kind of interesting. We're just looking for an old house to restore when we moved here. We didn't know there was any history associated with the property. About 6 months went by, and my son's in-laws brought a gift to our house when they wanted to check it out, and they brought a gift with them, which was a map from 1868, a local map. We were told the house was built in 1880, but the house was on this map from 1868. So, we know there's more history to this, and that caused us to dig a little deeper. My wife Florence found a online presentation from a historian that she showed me, and I dug into the references, and all of a sudden I click on this one link, and my whole computer screen lights up with a map fills the whole screen, and it's the map of the combat event I just described, and it has a yellow flash in the center of the map. And I look at it, and it's exactly over where my house is located. That was pretty amazing to find that out. And then I just want to learn every possible connection that the house had in American history. So all these other things unfolded: the War of 1812, the Civil War, the Underground Railroad, a few other things from old history. And then I got to sort of laughing to myself, thinking, well, wouldn't it be cool if it was connected to the Kennedy assassination or Apollo 11? And then it turns out it was. I have chapters talking about the connections to those two events as well. So it's pretty amazing story, and people really enjoy it. I haven't really mass marketed the book yet. I will be soon. A few hundred people that have read it, probably at least 50 of them, have sought me out to just tell me how much they enjoyed reading about it. And because it was written in almost like a crime story, since I have a police background, I provide the evidence it's part of the story. It's not a part of the footnotes. And that makes it kind of interesting. It's kind of like a cold case, but a 250-year-old cold case.
I remember reading it, but it's still just a little bit unclear to me. I remember there was something about finding a musket ball. There was a road that went somewhere that nobody knew it went there. And so can you give us a
Yeah.
little bit more about what you uncovered that we didn't know already?
One of the things that we put together is from the diaries, the direction that Washington's troops took to get to my property. According to the diary, they followed a road the whole way. They never said they went off road. The hill across from the creek from me, the top of that hill is not on a road. That bothered me about the story. That's one piece that didn't add up well. So I got to looking at the roads I drive every day. And around that location, there's a very sharp, almost 90-degree turn in the road. And it just dawned on me all of a sudden one day that maybe that used to go straight. And for some reason, they put a turn in there. There was a guy, I didn't know him, but I read about his efforts to find some of the quarries in that area. And I figured, well, if anybody would know there was an old road in that woods, it would be him. So I tracked him down and he said, well, I never saw a road before, but I got lidar imaging from the University of Delaware of the area and I can show you that. So he gets these lidar photography, and lidar has high-tech type cameras that take out all the vegetation, and all you can see is the earth and solid things. These aerial lidar images he brought to me, and sure enough, where that road took that sharp turn, it just went straight right to the top of the hill across from my house. And then I could go in the woods and I could actually see the contour in the earth in the woods where the road was. And I did find some old maps. They were a little bit out of scale, but they showed that there was a road there as well. So once I had that, I had the University of Delaware geologist that took the LiDAR images. I had him come to my house because I graduated from high school with him. And I
Ooh,
didn't tell him about what I was going to ask him. So when I showed him his LiDAR pictures, I said, these are your LiDAR discovered these colonial roads where the Revolutionary War soldiers came in. And he was amazed by that because he was doing it for the other purpose, not that purpose. So he got excited and he said, "My son found a cannonball at Delcastle." Well, that Delcastle's right there in that same little area. And what was great, I thought, well, if I do metal detecting and I find a cannonball, some people will be suspicious and think, oh, he bought that at an auction to make. So my ideal situation was not for me to find it, is to find a historical record of somebody else finding it. His 3-year-old son found it in 1992, and there was a news journal article about the find. That was really a nice discovery. And the size of the cannonball matched the cannons that the Hessian soldiers used that were talked about in the diaries. So, and it was in the same line of fire as from the hill at my house to across to where the creek where the Continentals were. So it was a shot that went over top of their heads and rolled a considerable distance. That was a really remarkable story. I feel like I did a good investigation, but it's kind of a lot of miracles involved in all that as well to be able to find something like that. It's just, can't take the credit. When I wrote the book about this, the Spring Grove Mill House, let me show you a picture.
yeah.
This is, people want to see what the house looks like. This is a pencil sketch done by one of the previous owners. I've written a lot of crime reports over the years, but I never actually wrote a book. I didn't want to study how to do a book. I wanted to approach it creatively. I call it the Jimi Hendrix model. Like Jimi Hendrix learned to play guitar by himself, just playing with it. And he created sounds that nobody ever heard before. So I approached the book the same way. I thought, well, maybe something creative will come out of me just writing the book. And one of the things that came out of that, because of all these miracles like the one I just described, I wanted to talk about that and give God credit for all these miracles. There's so many, there's like 20 or 30 incredible miracles in all the evidence that I was able to discover, and just the fact that one house could have that many connections to American history. So I created a chapter about all that, but it really wasn't part of the history. So I didn't want to put it in the first chapter. So I put it in the last chapter, but in the preface of the book, I did something that apparently has never been done before. I suggested that the reader skip to the last chapter. And that way I'm not putting God last because I'm telling the readers to read it first. What's interesting about that, and a byproduct of that, is it's more a personal chapter. So when people read the last chapter, they get to know me as a person. And then when they go back to the beginning and they're reading through the 250 years of American history, it feels like they're going through the journey with somebody that they've gotten to know. And that
Hmm.
makes the whole story a little bit more special. That was kind of neat to be able to do something that probably has never been done before in a book. And people really do appreciate it.
What you discovered is that the road that everybody thought that Washington had taken, in fact, wasn't actually the route he took. It was slightly different.
Yes, and it makes the story make sense because for it, the diaries conflicted because it never said that they left the road, that they just stayed on the road. That finally was resolved by LiDAR images and historical record.
This seems so much to me like it should be one of these historical documentaries. Has anybody done anything about that yet?
I've had a couple magazine articles. One just came out from realtor.com the other day.
Hmm.
Did a nice job of summarizing everything we're talking about.
I'll have to look that up. I'm a real estate broker and get their
Ah,
magazine. Good for them.
yeah.
You approach it as an investigator. You looked at it as you would look at solving any crime that you had worked on previously. And one of the things that comes up for me and comes up so often when I encourage people to pay attention to local government, to realize that it belongs to them. And if they don't like it, then it's theirs to change, it's theirs to fix, it's theirs to vote. And so I try to equip people to do that. And one of the ways to do it really is to look through all the documents, read all the information, go to the meetings, see if they all marry up. I just wondered if you had any tips for the average person who wants to make sure that their government's performing in the way they should be, serving the people and not themselves. Do you have any tips as a former investigator?
You mentioned about my current position in the Delaware General Assembly. I'm the chief of staff in the caucus of the House. And it's interesting because I also help candidates prepare to run for office, and most of them don't know how to find anything. And I just walk them through our website and teach them how to use it. And really, there's so much, there's links to all the meetings. You can attend all the committee meetings through Zoom, and you can ask questions through Zoom. You can attend in person. Just it's all there. It just takes a lot of tedious work, unfortunately, to get to the subjects you probably are interested in, because there's 500 bills probably in a year, maybe 50 of them are interesting.
Right. People often have just one or two issues that are really, really of interest to them. If you've been involved with a legislature, and also even as a trooper, what's the best way for the public to get through to you with their questions or their concerns, their opinions? Nobody ever knows. We get phone numbers, we get emails, we get form letters. What makes any public servant stand up and listen? Is there an approach that works better than others?
Yes. In Delaware, we're a pretty small state, about 1 million people, and we have 62 senators and rep state office holders. When there's a hot issue, they get 4 or 5 emails from constituents that aren't like a form letter from some organization, but an honest email from a voter that from their district that says what they want to happen. They get just a few of those. They react to that very strongly. Most people would assume that, oh, they're not really going to listen to me. But even one person asking for something, we have staff that support each member, and if they have an issue, their staff, tries to help on behalf of the member. So we have 14 members in our caucus, and we have 10 full-time staff. We work all year round, and we solve a lot of problems. People are having problems in government. They reach roadblocks in their unemployment, and they call us. And for the legislative branch, we have some authority over how much money they receive in their budget. They're pretty responsive to us. They'll get stuck, and then we'll call. We have contact people in each executive branch agency, and we call them and solve a lot of problems for people very fast and efficient way.
And then you also get some insight into where the issues are, where some of the unintended consequences of the legislation are coming through, and you can legislate better.
That's very challenging to try to get all the input you need. There's a lot of sides to an issue, and it's hard to find all the people with all the sides and have enough time to put it all together to try to think the best solution. A lot of times we end up introducing a bill, then people see it after it's introduced and want it changed and amend it, or if it's too radical, we'll just have a substitute bill and kind of start from scratch and rework it in a way that works for this other group that we didn't consider before. Sometimes at the end of session, we rush bills a little too fast, and some of that good stuff doesn't happen as efficiently as it does during the rest of the year. But it's just the nature of work kind of expands for the amount of time allowed for its completion. So things get pushed off till the end sometimes. That's kind of where it fails. The other time it fails is when people just aren't paying attention. Sometimes there's not enough local media where people even know what the issues are. I know in the county I live in, we don't have a TV. It's in Delaware, so people watch Philadelphia TV news. Doesn't cover a lot of Delaware stuff. Downstate in Sussex County, the beach area, They have their own TV station. They have a whole bunch of radio stations. They have free newspapers. The public's really in tune to the local issues, so they get a lot of good feedback. But for some reason, in the northern part that's closer to Philadelphia, I guess it just wasn't profitable for media to put a lot of attention there. And consequently, the only thing they care about is if a Trumper or a Biden person, when you knock on their door, because they don't know any local issues. But now the social media influencers are starting to educate people more, and now you can kind of redirect them because we're not involved in those presidential things. We're state government, so now we can talk about their property tax. They just got crushed on that, and they care about it now. It wasn't even in their thought pattern. There's not enough time and money to educate every voter about what their issue is. They have to have it in their head before you campaign at them.
It comes down to not using a form letter or a form email. I mean, I suppose that if there are enough of those are influential as well, but the ones that really make you stop and listen are the personal ones, real
Yeah.
correspondence where people
Yeah.
take the time to explain.
Uh-huh.
I always say that to people, your legislators don't know what's happening on your street. They don't know what it feels like to be in your shoes, to be in your situation, unless you tell them. And that's one really good reason to tell them. There's other good reasons to ride herd on things too, to keep everybody honest and keep them on their toes. People forget that nobody knows what it's like on the street where you live unless you tell them.
Government isn't designed to even work right if people don't care about what the government's doing. That's the failure point. If people are just ambivalent about what's happening, then the legislators don't have to try to satisfy them and they can do whatever they want. Nobody's paying attention. So it usually fails because of the people. Instinctively, people want to blame the politicians, but you really got to think about the people themselves are just too preoccupied a lot of times in their own problems in life to really take an interest in their government. But the system's designed to work only if they do that.
Yeah.
Hopefully, social media has helped do that more.
It's overwhelming. I focus locally because I was the mayor, I was a council member, I was a planning commissioner. I've been doing that for 22 years. So I really know what's going on. I've read everything practically that's there in all those years. And so I can be very helpful to people, but I can't focus on all of it. I can't do all of it. I can't do the state. I can't do the national. Like, thankfully, I have friends who I have a lot of trust and confidence in who will say, Debbie, pay attention to this. Here's what you should look at. Even someone who's been doing this for quite a long time, I'm overwhelmed. I can't do it all. What would you suggest to the average person who simply wants to own their government in the positive sense, because it is their government?
Well, most of the stuff, at least in Delaware, is online, and I assume that's common everywhere. It's been made more convenient than ever. You don't have to drive an hour to get to, or 4 hours to get to the Capitol to see what's happening. It's all there at your fingertips, but people are busy and it's always not always exciting stuff to do. You can't, people kind of rely on the media to do that for them, and they do that at some level, but like I said, there's some weaknesses in that, especially in certain areas.
Pay attention, and it's designed to work when you participate as a trooper, as an investigator, or what is the best way, in your experience, if people have uncovered something that they think isn't right? They've done some homework. It's not just secondhand. They've got some information that would indicate it. They've done their research. And if something seems to be a violation of the law, that how do they approach that? A lot of people just go, oh yeah, they're corrupt, and that's it. And sometimes it's an assumption, but sometimes it's happened so many times that everybody knows it. It's the word on the street, it's the knowledge on the street, and a lot of people have been victims of it. What's the best way for people to get that out, to contact law enforcement?
Usually, at least in Delaware and other states, the Attorney General's office is a key to that. If there's serious criminal corruption in Delaware, the Attorney General's not associated with the governor's office. It's an elected position. It's independent. So that's a place where you can go to report what you know that may be illegal. The FBI has resources dedicated to investigating political corruption as well. The state attorney general, if they thought it was necessary to go to that higher level federal government, they would probably do that themselves, have the case handled properly. Sometimes, because it's an elected official, then a re-election, maybe their opponent might dig up some evidence and then expose it that way. which I think that's supposed to be part of the process, get
It
to the
seems
bottom
to
of stuff.
be the power that we have is in our vote. One vote doesn't matter, but many votes matter, and your one vote becomes one of the many. If you could tell people anything that you just wish they would do to make it all work better or to be more efficient or do it more effectively, are there some things that you would say to people?
Stay engaged so that you know what's happening. And I said before, it's easier than ever. You can attend Zoom committee meetings in Delaware and
Hmm.
ask questions by Zoom. You can read all the bills that are on the agenda to see what you like and don't like. You can follow the media to see what are the hot issues, and then you can drill down a little bit and read the bill yourself to see if you like it or see what it needs to be changed, make a suggestion in a committee meeting. There's a lot of ways to help. A lot of people come to me and I teach them how to find all that.
Do you feel that on balance, the emergence of social media and the internet and the availability of things, that that's actually helping or improving people's engagement and they're keeping their elected representatives on their toes?
Very much so. In the last election cycle in 24, there were no social media influencers that represented the caucus that I have. And therefore, because of the lack of media in a lot of the state, that people just were totally, they knew no idea who's running for county council, what the issues are, school boards. They don't know anything about the school boards. Nobody's voting in school. Now, all of a sudden, these social media influencers are telling them what the issues are, and they're realizing it has an effect on their personal budget. So they start to take
Mhm.
interest in it, and it's made a big difference.
Wow, that's good to hear. That's
Yeah.
encouraging. Tell us the name of your book, where we can find it, and also if there's any other contact information that you'd like people to have, website or anything else.
Again, the book's called The Spring Grove Mill House, and the subtitle is, which is the key, is it's the home with the most ties to American history. When you read the book, I challenge you to decide if you agree with that subtitle. Most people have once they read it. They're pretty amazed. You can get it on Amazon, Spring Grove Millhouse, and I'll pop right up. I have a website, springgrovemillhouse.com. A lot of interesting pictures and information on the website. You get ways to contact me.
Thank you for coming tonight to talk to us. And thank you for your service for all these years and decades and for, I'm sure, changing the face of America in very positive ways and reminding us who George Washington was. He's probably the best influence that we could have in terms of how to really truly be a democracy and a people. So thank you for that. And I'd like to wish you and your family a wonderful 4th of July.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to tell everybody about what I discovered in the book, and thank you for having me.
Good night.
Good night.